What is a paranormal experience you've had? Serious. Back in 1984 when I was 10 years old I was out shopping with my mother when she suddenly all but collapsed. Some people and I helped her to a nearby seat, and after a few seconds she turned to me and said, "Your grandmother has died." We went home, a 30-minute drive, and upon arrival she learned that her mother had indeed died half an hour before. To this day it's the only inexplicable thing I've ever witnessed, but I have no doubt in my mind that there was some sort of link between the two of them that was broken that day. My grandfather has told me the story of the day his mother passed away. He was working in a shooting training facility, don't know if there's a word for that, and on that day, because of work, he had to be traveling somewhere. But he heard a voice which told him not to. He listened to the voice, came home, spoke to his mother, and she passed away about 4 hours after that. When I was a kid, I had a dream about my grandfather and he was saying goodbye to me. My mom woke me up to tell me he had just died and I hugged her to let her know that I knew already. She was petrified. I was his favorite grandchild and I miss him every day. I was at work, my mom had pancreatic cancer. I'd seen her the week before and was flying back up the following day. As I clocked off for the day I thought to myself to make note of the time. 11:07 p.m., then told myself that my mom had passed. Ignored it, went home and went about my day. 5 a.m. rolls around and my stepdad calls and tells me that my mom had indeed passed the prior evening. At 10:07 their time. I was 1 hour ahead due to living in Denver. I once had a dragonfly communicate with me basically telepathically. I was out in the swamp on my friend's boat while we looked for salvage. We took a break and were just sort of sitting dead in the water and enjoying the view when a big blue dragonfly zoomed up right in front of my face and hovered there. At that moment I felt the words "stay there" almost like, pushed into my head. It definitely didn't feel like my own thought. And immediately the dragonfly zooms at my face and I feel a sharp pain on my cheek. I looked down and the dragonfly had come to rest on the life jacket on the seat next to me with a biting fly in his little hands. He was just chilling and eating its face. The dragonfly told me to stay still and grabbed the fly off my face right as it bit me and then sat next to me for lunch. It was absolutely surreal. How much acid? I used to see a little boy in the corner of my room mostly at nighttime when I was about 13 yo. I could see and sense that he wasn't a living human being and his clothes were really old-fashioned. I was never really scared because he always had a positive energy around him, can't really explain it. I talked to him sometimes and he told me his name etc., can't really remember any of the things he told me anymore. But the most interesting thing happened during a fight between me and my mom. My cousin and her mother were visiting us at the moment and I had never told them about this boy, since ghosts aren't really a light discussion over dinner kind of thing. At some point I had had enough of the fight and got out, slammed the door behind me and for some reason went to a parking garage under our house to chill and cool down for a few hours. My mom, cousin and aunt went looking after me and eventually found me. My cousin told me that she had got the idea to look from the parking garage after she had seen a young blonde boy with weird clothes standing by a fence that was right next to a door to the garage. She told me that the boy just stood there and when he got her attention he jumped over the fence and disappeared. Only that behind the fence there was a thick bush full of big thorns and there is no way a little boy would have just jumped in it and let alone not make a sound after getting stabbed by the thorns. I guess my friendly ghost wanted to help. Daughter was about 8 months old. I was in the kitchen making fourth meal when she was in bed. The kitchen is directly beneath her room. I heard her a bump on the floor, her bottle, and her start crying. So I was trying to get everything I was cooking turned off so I could safely go give her the bottle back. Just as I was ready to walk out of the kitchen I heard footsteps come into her room and she stopped crying. I figured the missus wasn't sleeping, she got the bottle and went back to cooking. About 10 minutes later I go upstairs and the missus and the 2 other little ones were passed out. I woke up the missus and asked her if she got the baby's bottle and she shrugged me off and murmured no, I'm sleeping. Didn't sleep much that night. Lol. Edit. To all those who say it was probably the missus half asleep, it could be. I should probably have said before, but when the missus does do that stuff, and she does lol, she has kind of a heavy footstep and it didn't sound like that. When she's half asleep on autopilot she doesn't really have the mental awareness to tiptoe or we, that's what really made me think it wasn't her. When I saw her asleep I thought, well, that probably wasn't you, lol. When my oldest was a baby we had a monitor. I heard her crying and went into her room to soothe her back to sleep. I get there, and she's asleep again. I go back to our room and she's crying again. My wife is like, didn't you try to soothe her? I'm like, she was asleep. This time we both go. Daughter is asleep. We get back, Monitor is quiet. We go back to sleep. Then we hear over the monitor a woman's voice quietly say, "Pick her up." We run in our daughter's room, and no one is there, she's fast asleep. We find out the next day our neighbors bought the same monitor as us, and it was in the same channel. We were hearing their kid. We changed the channel on ours and it was fine. I worked at a haunted house, and once when looking down the hall of one of our actor exits, there stood a figure, like an all-black somewhat transparent silhouette of a human standing, motionless in front of me. I stayed at the hall entrance and called my boss over and asked her to look down the hall, but didn't give any indication that I saw anything so I wouldn't give her a false impression. When she looked, her expression was pure cold fear. "Who the fuck is that?" she said. I told her, "I don't know, but you see him too, right?" "I see through him." "Who the fuck is that?" And before I could say anything more, it came full sprint at us. My boss screamed and ran away, but I was curious what it would do, so I stayed. It got right up to my face and just stopped, inches away from my nose, then suddenly dissipated into thin air. I still occasionally see my boss, and she confirms every time that we saw the same thing, and thinks I was an idiot for staying, but at the same time, it was cool. Is it hard to walk with such enormous balls? My grandmother's sister was a nun and she stayed with our family during her last years. She always sat on the terrace of our house, overlooking the garden and streets. She loved staying there as she can watch the people go by. She died when my little brother was like 3 or 4. Terrace wasn't usually used by us ever since no one liked going up there. A year after, little brother and I decided to go up to the damned place. Halfway through the hallway, he stopped, pointed at where our grandma always sat, and asked me, "Who's that? Is that one of our grandmas?" I've posted this before, but here you go. My brother and I were home alone one night watching TV. My mother was working a night shift and father was out. Father came home and pushed the door ajar and poked his head through to say hello. We both turn around and say hello back. Father closed door. 30 seconds after, another man opens the door to say hello. We both turn around and say hello back. Man closes door. We assume a friend of my father has come back to the house too. Anyway, about 5 minutes later I head into the kitchen where my father was, making dinner or whatever, and I'm expecting to see his friend again. I see that he's alone making dinner and assumed his friend was upstairs in the bathroom. I ask my father who his friend is. My father looks at me and asks me, "What friend?" I reply, "The guy who came back with you." Dad looks at me thinking I'm some sort of weirdo. He says I came back home on my own. Biggest what I've ever experienced. My brother was freaked out to the max. Remembering the man's face, he was pale looking and bright white hair. My dad used to freak me and my brothers out as kids by wearing some old Halloween mask that just made him look like a wrinkly older guy. Maybe your dad was trying to fuck with you and didn't get the reaction he expected. You should ask him about it, see if he remembers. One night my sister and I saw a black figure poke its head around a wall in our house looking at us. We were the only ones home. There were times I would hear children laughing when none were around. I've heard muffled voices coming from our TV when it was turned off. After I moved out of our house, my mom and sister woke up to one of the dining room chairs pushed up to the kitchen sink like someone who couldn't reach the sink would need. A few days before I had my daughter, my grandmother had emergency surgery and didn't wake up from it until a week later. She never really recovered from it, but did tell some of my cousins that she died when my daughter was born and then said she saw us driving home from the hospital. She had details she couldn't possibly know. She died a month after I had my daughter. Everyone in our family knows that when you die, you let everyone alive know you are okay. People get visited in dreams. I was visited by both grandmothers and my sister was visited by our grandfather. They are very different from dreams and have left us very shaken and comforted. And I've heard muffled voices coming from our TV when it was turned off. Sometimes, speakers can pick up radio signals. It's entirely possible that some of the wiring was positioned in such a way that a local radio station was interfering with it. Was at a beach house with my family when I was a kid, shared room with my siblings, and my big brother, already in his late teens, got the top bunk and I got the bottom one. Me being very young, around 11 or 12, went to sleep while he was out with his friends and my mom watching movies in the living room. I had a horrible nightmare and woke up gasping, in a cold sweat and shivering, scared out of my mind. My brother somehow noticed it and calmed me down, hugging me, telling me it would be okay, it was just a dream. Didn't really see his face, but it was a masculine figure and voice, bigger than me, that came down from above me. In the morning I went to thank him for that and he was very confused, said he didn't come home until early morning and since it was so late he slept in the other room not to wake me. Yo! This is a good one. Fuck yeah.